Hello, everybody. Happy early Halloween. As you all see, I take Halloween very seriously here at Powers Law Group. And we're just very happy for all of you guys to be joining us here today. I'm joined by our managing attorney, Ruby Powers. Ruby, do you want to say hello?
Yes, thanks so much for joining us. We've got a lot of great information about the E-2 visa here today.
Awesome. So yeah, we're going to be spilling the beans on what you need to know about the E-2 visa. And our wonderful host here, Attorney Powers, is going to be giving you guys all those beans. And let's give us a little background on her. She was licensed in 2008. She founded Powers Law Group in November 2009. Our anniversary is coming up, so stay tuned for those fun pictures. She also is board certified, so she knows her stuff, guys. And she's also an author of Build and Manage Your Successful Immigration Law Practice Without Losing Your Mind. So check that book out. It's a really good read. And Attorney Powers, take it away.
All right. Well, we're going to get straight to it with the E-2s. So maybe you're looking to invest, you're looking for options. Maybe you're looking to transition out of a employee-based visa, or you're looking to come to the United States. All different types of options. One thing you need to know is that to get the E-2, to even start, you need to make sure that you are a citizen of one of these countries. And also, if your spouse is a citizen of one of these two countries, of the E-2 list, that is can be helpful as well. And there's lots of different possibilities. So make sure you know this list. The ones that are one country that's not on this is India, but some that we do have a lot: Mexico, Turkey. Oh, and also Venezuela is not on this list either. So there's some countries that are just notably not on the list, but this can also change at any point. It's a treaty between the two countries. So let's say you're wanting to come to the United States and you are a member of one of those countries, you can consider, there's a variety of e-visas. So we'll just mention them briefly. There's the E-1, which is for the treaty trader for substantial trade. The treaty investor, which is what we're going to talk about today, substantial money and a direct operations enterprise invested and active. And the E3 is for Australians in a specialty occupation. But we're going to be talking only about the E2. So the key points to remember are that it's a non-immigrant visa. So that means you cannot have immigrant intent. Non-immigrant means you're going to come briefly to the United States for intended purpose, but you have plans to return home. Usually when we apply for E2s, we also make a statement that says that that exact same thing, that you have intent to go back home at some point. And it allows a national of one of the treaty countries, which is what we mentioned in the beginning, to invest a substantial amount of capital in a U.S. business. And you also could, if you're not the investor necessarily, you also could be an employee of a qualifying organization, which that means that at least the majority, 50% or more, is owned by the nationality in which you are as an employee. And we'll go into that a little bit more. So who can file, what are some of the general qualifications? Well, there's only a handful, but then you go into a lot of the details. So to be the E2 treaty investor, national of one of the countries, which we mentioned, have invested in the past or will be actively in the process of investing a substantial amount of capital in a bona fide enterprise. So let's break that down. So generally, when we're applying for E2s, the business is about to start opening, or it's already opened. It's either been going on for a while and you're investing in the existing one, or you're about to just open the turnkey, like you're about to open the business because you've been doing all the preparations. You cannot work for this business until you get the E2. You can be an investor from afar, not doing the day-to-day. You can put the capital in, hire someone to do the day-to-day for them to run it, but you cannot come to the U.S. into the United States on the E-2 and work with the business more directly hands-on until the E-2 has been approved. Now, substantial amount, need to make sure that it is not a marginal amount, but it's a substantial amount. And what that means is that, let's say the business is worth, let's just say $50,000. Then you would need to have invested as close to the $50,000 or have a payment plan, but have put the substantial amount of it in. And it's also proportional to what type of business it is. Professional service businesses generally are the ones that have the least barrier to entry in terms of funds. They might need other expertise and licenses. But for possibly a restaurant or a store or something larger that takes more of a space and has more widgets and employees, then it would need a bit more of investment. So those are all things to consider. And then must be entered solely to develop and direct that investment. So we usually speak about the investor more than the employee, but that their job will be this, and to be working on this business. So going into a little bit more detail, investment in the treaty investors placing of capital, including funds and other assets, are at risk in the commercial sense. So it can't be just putting $50,000 in the bank account. It actually has to be in play, in business, and the capital must be subject to partial or total loss if the investment fails. So there has to be some type of, there has to be a risk if there's something were to happen to that investment. The treaty investor must show the funds have not been obtained directly or indirectly from criminal activity. And what that means is that you have to show a paper trail of where those funds come from. So if you've earned that money, then you need to make sure that you can show with taxes and pay stubs, with bank statements, where those funds have come from. Or if you were gifted money, you need to show where that person got their money from before they gifted it to you. So that is very critical. And in some cases, in countries, they don't keep lots of records. This is something that you have to work a little bit harder to do. So now, substantial amount of capital is relationship to the total cost of either purchasing an established enterprise or establishing a new one. So usually when someone says, I want to buy X business that already exists, then it's sort of easier, because you could say, well, how much does it cost? And then we can figure out, what would be the amount that would be substantial in relationship to the total cost. Now, if it's a new business, you're just making it up from scratch, then you really have to do some work of like, well, how much does it cost? Office space, website, any licenses you need, a staff, insurances, things like that, marketing materials. So you have to go and make a budget, and then you have to think about how much would it really cost to get it started operational. I might be getting ahead of myself, but you're going to want to have like a 5-year business plan on what you're going to be doing. Now, it needs to be sufficient to ensure the investor's financial commitment to the substantial operation of the enterprise, and a magnitude to support the likelihood that the treaty investor will successfully develop a direct enterprise. The lower the cost of the enterprise, the higher proportionally the investment must be considered substantial. So now everyone says to me, well, how much do I have to invest? And I say, well, there's not a number. There's not like a number with the EB5, there's a number, and everyone knows those numbers. And so they always think about that, but there isn't one with E2s. So when you're talking about a professional services industry, sort of like what I do with law firm, usually there's less barrier, like I mentioned, of cost, and you just need to have the expertise or whatever the services that you're about to provide. In reality, now with COVID and everything, you could be running anything from your house for the most part, and not need an office space and as much overhead as before. But if it's a restaurant or a dog grooming store or a daycare or some other school, something like that, then you've got to work out there's a lot more costs that are involved. Now, another thing to mention is that a bona fide enterprise refers to a real active operating commercial or entrepreneurial undertaking which produces services or goods for profit. It must meet applicable legal requirements for doing that. So you need to make sure that you're up to date on all the rules that you would have, like for example, the daycare. You would need to make sure that you are have all the licenses you need for childcare and things like that. If you're whatever it may be, or for a restaurant, for example, making sure you have all the licenses. So then those are things that you must consider.
Okay, so quick question, Ruby.
Yeah.
So basically before they're able to apply for this E-2 visa, they're supposed to have all their certifications before they even consider applying?
Yes. Yes. So you have to have it ready to just rock and roll, basically. You have to ready to open the door. In some cases, you might already have it open. You might have already paid for everything, hired a manager, and it's already running, and you apply and you're just waiting for the approval so you can go insert yourself and make it more successful. Some things could be running without the owner there so much, but if you're starting it from scratch, I know from experience that that's almost impossible. You definitely need to have somebody who knows what they're doing running the show, and that could be that you hire someone, but the bottom line is you can't start working in the business until it's approved, but you can put people in place to be working on the business. Anyone can own a business in the United States. It's just the issue of they can't work there without the valid work authorization or proper visas.
Okay. Okay.
So, and I'm trying to cover like a lot of the big picture. Really, what happens when we have a consult, we've had a lot this week, is people tell me, I want to come to the United States. I have an idea, or I have a business in my home country. What should I do? And we explore, possibility of an L1A, which if you have a business in your home country and you want to do a new office in the US. But if you don't have an office in a company in your home country and you're starting a new venture here, then and you're one of those countries in the treaties, then this is the one we usually would talk about. So, and then, some people we talk about, do you want to buy something existing or do you want to start something new that you have an experience with? So, what are some of the things you would need when you file, just to give you an idea? A job description of what the owner will be doing, the resume, CV, and let's say they want to own a restaurant. Well, it's nice if they have prior restaurant or business experience. Or let's say they want to own, I don't know, a dog grooming store business. Then if they had that experience in the past, something that can connect the dots, that makes it a little bit more believable that they'll have the expertise to make the business successful. Any other educational achievements, proof that they've always stayed in this status in the country, never overstayed. And then when you talk about the business, you want to talk about, the entity, the business plan. It's a prior existing business, then showing that it's healthy and it's been doing everything that it needs to do with paying the bills and taxes and but if it's a new one, then you won't have as much evidence because you'll be just starting it out. So these are just some of the things to consider that we would need, and really it can take a while to get this all prepared. So keep that in mind. When people hire us to do an E-2, we generally need, depending on how quickly they can focus and work on this, and COVID has definitely slowed things down with the consulates, but also with getting other things done in the US. It can take, I don't know, about a month or two, I'd say honestly, to get all these things done. So you have to keep that in mind. Now, if you're in the United States, what you do is you file the I-129, and you can do the premium processing, which now is taking 15 business days, which is around 3 weeks. And you also, they doubled it to around 2,000. I forgot the number. The number is changed a week ago. It's 2,000 and something for the new premium processing. So you would have the form, the filing fee, and all the evidence, everything from the plan to the CV to the incorporations, everything we just mentioned from prior slide. So these are very intense, and there's a lot of work put into them. Now, if you are outside of the country, what you do is you apply with a DS-160, which is a form for non-immigrant visa. You can schedule an appointment, and then this is where it gets a little complicated. Every consulate is a little different. Some of them do more E-2s, countries do more E-2s than others, and they'll have very detailed reports of what you want, what they want to see, their specifications, and then some don't see them as often, and they're not as detailed on their websites. So what the other thing challenge is that when you're applying abroad is that you generally are uploading the file of the documents. And so remember how I just mentioned there'd be a lot of evidence. Well, an attorney has to figure out if you only have this much data you can upload, which usually could be like, let's say 50 or 100 pages. What are the most essential to upload for the officer to review? And then you wait for an appointment. And at the appointment, so this is where you actually get to talk with an officer. Officer will ask you questions about the company. Now that's where it's really important if you're doing consular processing to be able to defend the business, to be able to know your numbers, to have a plan, to be able to know that packet inside and out and make it believable to the officer that you'll be successful with that business venture. When you apply inside the country, it's all done over paper. You're not having, they don't do interviews for the E-2s inside the country. So that's your opportunities only over paper. So there's the good and the bad with each of those different situations. And the other thing that could happen is that you apply for an E-2 inside the country, and we've done this before as well, and the spouse was in the home country. So once the E-2 is approved for the primary person, we could schedule a consulate appointment for the spouse or children to come into the US. And just to mention that, what's other great thing about the E-2 is that spouse and children are allowed into the US, but a spouse is allowed to work. So if the primary person has an E-2 and the spouse gets an E-2 as well, the spouse can work pretty much anywhere they want to in the United States. And this also gives people options if for some they were interested in trying more of a permanent stay in the US. If the spouse were to get sponsored for a green card, then that takes care of the whole family situation. Also gives people options if one spouse is dependent on an employer and there might be a layoff or something like that, that the whole family can still stay in the country if one of the family members has an E-2. So that's what makes the E-2 also something that's attractive in that respect. Now, the period of stay, it really depends on the reciprocity with the country. For example, they can allowed to give a maximum of each stay 2 years, but the reciprocity changes. So some countries have a reciprocity of 5 years. Some, like Mexico, for example, has 1 year. So they can only get them in 1 year amounts and they would have to renew. So it gets a little complicated, but what you have to consider is sometimes you actually have to renew the whole visa, and sometimes you can get it extended just by leaving the US and coming back in and getting a further I-94 period of time. The biggest thing to take away from this is that you can actually extend it for as long as you want. You just need to make sure you meet the requirements. Some people have had E-2s for 10 or 20 years, but generally, if someone were intending to stay for longer than a good handful of years, they might be looking for something more permanent, so that they have that stability. Because again, this is a non-immigrant visa, and the intent should be for the immigrant to return and to only stay for a short period of time. So that's something to consider. And like I mentioned, spouses and children under 21 can be included on the E-2. And when if you have a child that's getting close to 21, you want to really be, and again, this is unmarried children, you want to make sure that you're having a conversation about what that visa might be for the backup. Maybe that you want to get an E-2 for that child on their own. Maybe they can go be a student. Maybe they can get an H-1B. So you want to make sure that you have a plan and you don't wait to the last minute. Well, we covered a lot of material, and the E-2 is a great visa to have. You can have it for as long as you can meet the requirements. Your spouse can work, your children can be in the US up to 21 unmarried. Some of the limitations are whichever you member are a citizen of one of those countries. So that's really what limits it. And then for some folks, they would prefer to buy an established business like a franchise rather than opening up something on their own. But some people, they have a hobby that turns into a passion, that they want to start a business in that field. And so this is a great opportunity to come to the US, to have flexibility, and to help the US economy, to give yourself time in the US, family time in the US. And it's a great visa to help transition maybe to something else or to have a backup plan. And so we have a lot of experience with all different types of businesses, and I'm author of a business book, so I enjoy these visas as well. And we have experience with lots of different consulates, the US Embassy and consulates around the world. So thank you for watching today. And if you have questions, you can always reach us for a consult. And we do a deep dive into all possibilities, not just looking at one particular visa, but if this is one that's of an interest of yours, we usually do 2 consults within a 2-week period to make sure that we go over all the details and have a great strategy before we get started. So thank you for watching.
Yeah, wow. Thank you so much, Ruby. That was really good information, and we flew by it pretty fast. If you guys have any questions about anything that Ruby may have said, you guys can put it in the Q&A box down below, or just comment it down below, and we'll get to those answers as we can. But yeah, thank you all for joining us here on our E-2 talk. Join us next week for a very interesting webinar. We're going to be discussing the election and its possibilities and what we think and predictions. One of attorney's favorite topics here. So join us, and yeah, let us know if you guys have any other topics that you guys may like for us to discuss here on our webinars. Again, if you missed our webinars from the past, feel free to check those out here on our Facebook videos. You can also look at them in our YouTube at Ruby Powers Law. And if you guys have any questions or concerns in regards to your immigration status, give us a call at 713-589-2085 or send us an email at contact@rubypowerslaw.com, and check us out on our social media, guys. We post really good stuff. So thank you all. Ruby, any last parting words?
Yes, it looks like we just got a question. As a spouse of an E-2 visa holder, can I work for other people? And if so, is there paperwork that has to be completed? Yes, you can, and you would apply for the work authorization, and with I-765 is the form, and but you will be granted it. It's just a matter of applying for that, and we can guide you through what that process would look like. But that is one of the benefits of the E-2, to have that flexibility. And the other thing I wanted to mention before we close up is that, if you need to renew, or you're talking about travel concerns, because there are a lot of restrictions with the CDC travel bans,
Mhm.
And quarantines. The thing is that it's really all about, you could have a strategy put in place, a handful of months in advance, but you might have to keep narrowing in that strategy as closer to that date, because for example, the US has a list of what countries they won't accept if you're traveling directly from, and that can be updated and changed on a regular basis. There's also although the E-2 visa is not impacted by the presidential proclamation banning mostly H's, L's, and J's until the rest of the year, there are a lot of consulates that are not open, or there are limited services. And if there's some type of an issue with travel, it really is taking, it's almost like a Rubik's Cube or some mental gymnastics to figure out which countries people can travel through to get back in, and which ones consulates are open. So we're constantly monitoring that. And speaking to our webinar for next Friday about the election update, we're hoping that we'll have the decision after Tuesday evening or around that date. But if there's a close margin or mail-in ballots or something like that, we'll see what happens. But the goal of the webinar next week, with whatever the final, hopefully we'll have a decision on the election by then, that we can make some predictions as to what to expect in immigration. And so looking forward to that session next
Yeah,
Friday.
tune into our Powers Hour. That's going to be Tuesday afternoon. Hopefully we have some news or some updates by then. But yeah, tune into our Powers Hour. That also is a little tiny webinar, but just tidbits of what's going to be happening on our webinar. They're kind of fun, so check those out. And
Okay.
again, thank you all so much for joining us here today. And for our registrants, we really appreciate you and the questions that you asked. Attorney Powers, I guess we can bid them adieu.
And happy Halloween this weekend.
Happy Halloween, guys. Can you guys tell we're excited here? And you all stay safe. Bye.
Bye.